The Trump administration, in a move that sent shockwaves through the nation, implemented a sweeping freeze on federal funding. This freeze targeted a wide array of programs. These included foreign aid initiatives, funding for NGOs, and programs promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion. The administration also targeted funds allocated for initiatives combating woke gender ideology and programs related to the Green New Deal. The Office of Management and Budget issued a memo. This memo directed federal agencies to halt the disbursement of funds for these targeted programs, citing a need for review. However, this memo was later rescinded, adding another layer of confusion to the already chaotic situation. The administration offered various justifications for its actions. They argued that the funding freeze was necessary to ensure that taxpayer dollars were being used appropriately. They also claimed that the freeze allowed for a review of the targeted programs to align them with the administration's priorities. However, critics were quick to point out the arbitrary and politically motivated nature of the freeze. They argued that the Trump administration was attempting to circumvent Congress's power of the purse. The funding freeze had immediate and far-reaching consequences. Organizations reliant on federal funding found themselves in dire straits. State governments were forced to scramble to fill the funding gaps, putting essential services at risk. The freeze created an atmosphere of uncertainty and fear among those who depended on these programs for their livelihoods and well-being. The Trump administration's funding freeze faced immediate legal challenges. A coalition of 22 states and separately 23 state attorneys general filed lawsuits challenging the freeze. These lawsuits argued that the administration had overstepped its authority. They contended that the executive branch could not unilaterally suspend congressionally appropriated funds. The lawsuits alleged that the funding freeze violated the separation of powers, a fundamental principle of the U.S. Constitution. On January 31, 2025, a U.S. district judge issued a temporary restraining order against the freeze. This order provided temporary relief to the organizations and state governments affected by the funding freeze. However, the Trump administration continued to delay or reject payments, despite the court order. This blatant disregard for the judicial branch's ruling further fueled the controversy surrounding the funding freeze. On February 3, 2025, Judge Lauren Alicon issued a second temporary restraining order against the freeze. Judge Alicon expressed skepticism about the administration's justifications for the freeze. She noted that the administration had not provided sufficient evidence to support its claims of inappropriate use of funds or misalignment with presidential priorities. The coalition of states argued that the funding freeze was causing irreparable harm to their citizens. They pointed to disruptions in essential services, such as healthcare, education, and environmental protection. The states also argued that the freeze was jeopardizing jobs and putting people's lives at risk. The states' lawsuits painted a picture of chaos and uncertainty caused by the Trump administration's actions. Judge John J. McConnell Jr., on February 10, 2025, issued a significant ruling. He ordered the immediate restoration of all federal funding frozen by the Trump administration. Judge McConnell's ruling was a resounding rebuke of the administration's actions. He stated that the administration had violated his previous order from January 31, 2025, which had temporarily halted the freeze. The court's decision was a victory for the rule of law and a testament to the importance of the separation of powers. Judge McConnell's ruling made it clear that the executive branch could not act unilaterally in defiance of Congress's constitutional authority. The ruling also provided much-needed relief to the organizations and state governments that had been struggling to cope with the fallout from the funding freeze. Legal experts argued that the Trump administration's actions were part of a broader pattern of executive overreach. They pointed to other instances where the administration had attempted to bypass Congress and exercise unchecked power. The funding freeze was seen as a dangerous precedent that could undermine the balance of power in the U.S. government. The funding freeze also highlighted the deep ideological divisions within the country. The targeted programs often reflected progressive values, such as environmental protection, social justice, and global cooperation. The Trump administration's attempts to defund these programs were seen by many as an assault on these values. The funding freeze had a significant impact on organizations and state programs across the country. One such organization was a health clinic in Phoenix, Arizona. that provided essential services to at-risk populations. The clinic, which relied heavily on federal funding, was forced to lay off staff and reduce services due to the freeze. The clinic's director, Jessica Leach, spoke out about the devastating impact of the freeze on her organization and the community it served. The funding freeze saga is a stark reminder of the fragility of democratic institutions and the importance of upholding the rule of law. It also underscores the need for vigilance in the face of executive overreach and the importance of protecting the rights and freedoms of all Americans.